Hello there, just a quick announcement. There are spoilers for the movie Split in this review. There are spoilers for the movie Split in this review. Thank you. So I saw Split yesterday, the new film from M. Night Shyamalan. I have some very conflicting emotions about it. Please do join me as I work my way through this 2,000-word review. Why do I do this to myself? This video may only be 10 minutes long, but you can rest assured that it took me at least 10 hours. So first of all, the things that I liked about this movie, I feel like Split really excels in two areas, in its performances and in its prolonged intensity. So first of all, the tension of the movie. This film gets under your skin, and I think there's a number of factors that make it so effective. First of all, the score is super eerie, and particularly in the second half, it was stressing me out, to be honest with you, but in a good way, because it's a psychological horror. Those are the types of movies you watch that should stress you out, you know, that's kind of the point. Also, I want to give a round of applause for the set design in this movie. I think it was really good set design. But in all seriousness, I do think that the sets in this movie were really good. I'm talking mainly about the ones in the underground basement scenes. I think that those sets looked real, they looked like a real place, but at the same time, they had such a shabby, unloved, completely forgotten look about them that they almost took on a kind of nightmarish quality, which reminded me very much of Silent Hill. That's a film which has a lot of problems, but the set design is superb, just as it is here in Split. And of course you have to give props to M. Night Shyamalan's directing. I made fun of the guy a lot in my review of The Last Airbender, as I feel most of the internet did, but here he does do a genuinely good job. His directing in the underground bunker scenes I feel really heightens the claustrophobia of it all. And also there's a lot of scenes and shots where it really just focuses on James McAvoy's face and it just stays there and it's like very slowly getting closer and it has such a great unnerving effect because you do not know what this character is going to do next and it just keeps you on edge for the entire time. Very effective. Of course, it's really difficult to talk about Split without mentioning James McAvoy. He really shows a whole new side to himself in this movie. It's a very, very memorable performance, and undoubtedly he does steal the show. However, I do also want to talk about Anya Taylor-Joy. Of the three girls that get kidnapped, she is kind of like the lead girl, I suppose you could say, and I think she also does a really good job, much better than the other two girls who I feel like were maybe slightly forgettable. Would it be harsh to say that? Their performances maybe weren't as impactful, and maybe that's why the movie dispenses of them with such little grace or dignity. Also, shout out to Betty Buckley, who plays James McAvoy's psychologist. I think she had some genuinely quite touching scenes in this movie, although I do think that she veered into some perhaps overly expository dialogue at certain points. I have to say, when she did that lecture over Skype, not sure why that was important, but it was over Skype, don't forget, it was over Skype. And it very much reminded me of Morgan Freeman's character in Lucy, who does a lecture in that movie in which he explains the plot of Lucy. In this case it wasn't quite as shamelessly expository, but it was reminiscent at parts. But I do want to get into some of the problems that I had with this movie. I'm probably going to drone on a little bit, so do keep in mind that I did actually like this movie. I do think that it's very solid, and I'd probably watch it again at some point in the distant future. But I just think that there are a number of things that kind of let it down and hold it back from greatness. It's a good movie, but I can't say it's a great movie. First of all, this movie confuses my suspension of disbelief in how abruptly it jumps into a completely different genre. When the movie starts, it seems to want you to think that this takes place in the real world. It's a very grounded premise. You've got James McAvoy, he has dissociative identity disorder, and he kidnaps three girls. Now, I'm sure a professional psychologist could point out a vast array of inaccuracies in the presentation of DID in this movie, but for the sake of just kind of enjoying the movie, I can suspend my disbelief and think, okay, this is taking place in the real world, that's fine. Where the problem arises for me is that when a movie builds its premise on at least a moderate amount of realism, when the movie then jumps into full science fiction at the end, it's very jarring. It's like narrative whiplash. One minute you're watching a psychological horror, and the next minute you're watching basically the movie Alien. It just makes me think, how did we get here? You know, I do think that traversing multiple genres in one movie is possible, but I think you need to do it with a little bit more care, you know, transition slightly more smoothly between the genres rather than just, this is a thriller, now it's science fiction, and it's like, what? What just happened? Plus, it's not just that this move between genres is jarring, but also it just kind of doesn't really make much sense from a plot perspective. I do not understand why this beast identity of James McAvoy turns him into mega steroids version of James McAvoy. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense in the continuity of the movie. Earlier in the film, they do give an example of a case where I think it was a woman with dissociated identity disorder. One of her identities was blind, the other one wasn't, and so her optic nerves healed when she split identity. So, like, I guess this kind of physical change is an extension of that idea, but where the power of the mind curing blindness was already quite a tough pill to swallow in this supposedly realistic universe, this is just on a whole other level though. It's like 1 minute I'm James McAvoy, the next minute I'm basically the Hulk. And the only explanation is, it's because my brain said I was the Hulk. And I need something more than that. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the information that we've been given so far, you know, it's just doesn't make sense to me. And because the two halves of this movie are so wildly different, you've got the first half, which is relatively grounded in reality, and the second half, which is just kind of like a science fiction monster flick, it kind of makes you feel like you're watching a completely different movie, you know, like the movie got switched around halfway through, which has a bad effect on some of the emotional payoffs, I think. The script also feels like it's kind of on the back foot from this point as well, and there's never really any clarification as to who this beast identity is. At the end of the movie, there's a news report, and the news anchor lady, she says, one of the identities was an amalgamation of all the zoo animals because he was living and working at the zoo. And I'm like, okay, I can kind of buy that someone with severe dissociative identity disorder might develop an animal identity if they were surrounded by animals at all times. I can kind of get on board with that idea. What I can't get on board with is why that identity would then make them impervious to 2 close-range shotgun blasts to the body. I do not understand why he is able to withstand that level of physical trauma, because like there are some pretty tough animals at zoos, like let's say there's a rhino and an elephant and I don't know, a silverback gorilla. These are all strong animals, but I think even they would struggle with 2 close-range shotgun blasts to the body. I just don't get it. It doesn't feel like it works in the continuity of the movie. Another problem I had with this movie is more my fault than M. Night Shyamalan's fault, and I fully acknowledge that this is a hugely unfair criticism, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I feel like M. Night Shyamalan has created an audience expectation at this point. When you go to an M. Night Shyamalan film, you're expecting a plot twist at the end. And when you build your career on earth-shattering plot twists, that's kind of the consequence that you face. You know, people are going to go to your movie and expect a plot twist. And when there's not a plot twist at the end, I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed. Like, I know it's my own fault, I shouldn't have gone in expecting one, but I did. And I wanted one, and there wasn't one. Some people say that the link to Unbreakable is the big plot twist in this movie, but I do not consider that to be a plot twist at all, because it has no connection to the plot of the movie. Frankly, it's like a self-contained afterthought. If you're considering the link to Unbreakable as a huge plot twist, then I guess you've also got to consider, you know, Nick Fury showing up at the end of the first Iron Man movie as a huge plot twist. It's not a plot twist. Nick Fury showing up had no bearing on the plot of the first Iron Man movie, just like Bruce Willis showing up has no bearing on the plot of Split. That doesn't count as a plot twist. It's maybe an unexpected epilogue, but it is not a plot twist. There is no twist in this movie. I have more I want to say about the link to Unbreakable, and we'll get onto that in a minute, but first I just want to talk about something that I feel like M. Night Shyamalan did in this movie, and I can't for the life of me understand why he would have done it, and that is something that I'm calling twist baiting. I feel like he knew that audiences would expect a plot twist when going into this movie, and I feel like he kind of encouraged that. He encouraged people to think there was a plot twist by laying down these sort of red herrings throughout the movie. Plot baiting. It was bait for us to think there's a plot twist, and then we jump on the bait, and then there is no plot twist, and then we're sad. So examples of twist baiting in this movie, first of all, references to James McAvoy's place of work. Whenever the psychologist would have a conversation with Kevin, or whichever identity it was she was talking to, she would always say place of work. She would never say, you know, where he worked. She would just say, at your place of work, blah 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 blah. And of course I was sat there eagerly anticipating the twist of my life, and I was like, place of work, she's not saying where he works, where does he work? The cogs were turning, and I was like, maybe he's like got some kind of shady government job. I don't know where I was going with it. I just had a feeling that maybe that would have something to do with a potential twist. And then at the end of the movie it's revealed he works at the zoo. And there's no, you know, that doesn't really make a difference on the plot. There was no reason for that to be a reveal. You know, we could have learned that halfway through the movie, it would have been fine. Would not have made a difference. And I just think it's very odd that he decided to keep that a secret. But then also I feel like it's heavily implied, particularly in the first half of this movie, that the character of Casey, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, knows something about Kevin, played by James McAvoy. I feel like there's an implication that they've met before, or they've got some kind of history, because let's just reflect on the events of the movie. So Kevin gets in the car instead of the girl's dad, and Casey just kind of looks at him, and then looks away and kind of looks around, and like, yes, she looks nervous, but she looks like she knows what's going on. I mean, if she didn't know what was going on, then why wouldn't she have done what any rational person would have done and gone, who are you, why are you in my car, what's going on? Like, she doesn't. And the weird thing as well is Kevin doesn't even try to knock her out. Like, he gasses the other two girls, done, and then there's like a huge delay before he does anything with Casey, and then there's an implication that maybe he wouldn't have even tried to knock her out had she not opened the door and drawn attention to herself. It's bizarre. And then when they get to the underground basement, the other two girls are understandably terrified, and then Casey is just kind of like super chilled out, just kind of like, there's an implication that she knows what's going on, that she knows where she is. Like, why is she so much more relaxed than the other two girls? I feel like it was twist baiting. Like, it was kind of like M. Night Shyamalan wanting us to believe that there was some kind of connection between Casey and Kevin, and then there wasn't. And it's just odd, and it makes her behaviour in this movie really difficult to understand. Like, I just don't get it. Am I stupid? Yes. So, to wrap things up, I suppose I've got to mention the connection between this film and Unbreakable. First of all, I just want to say I totally called this. I didn't have this movie spoiled for me per se, but I did see something prior to going in, which said something along the lines of, the ending of this movie has M. Night Shyamalan fans talking. And that was all I needed. Somehow it just popped into my mind straight away, this is an Unbreakable sequel. I don't know why. I don't know why I immediately jumped to that conclusion, but I did, so maybe I'm psychic. Who knows? Anyway, I saw Unbreakable a few years ago, and I did like it. I'm not in love with it or anything. I think it's a perfectly fine movie, but I wasn't necessarily craving more. That being said, if this Unbreakable cinematic universe... Oh, I'm getting sick of saying cinematic universe. Sorry, it's actually activating my gag reflex at this point. But if an Unbreakable / Split crossover movie were to happen, let's face, I probably would go and see it. Although that being said, I am skeptical about whether M. Night Shyamalan could pull it off, because at the end of the day, we're not that far removed from M. Night Shyamalan's disaster period, as I like to call it, where just everything he produced was a huge steaming pile of garbage. You know, we've had The Visit, which I've heard is good, I haven't seen it, and we've had this. 2 solid movies. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's back in his prime, so I feel like maybe this is a bit of a gamble, it could go horribly wrong, but I'm fascinated to see how it goes, and I will probably end up seeing it if it gets made. What I will say, and what I think is perhaps the smartest part of all of this, is that now M. Night Shyamalan can go into an Unbreakable sequel and have his villain already fully set up and fully developed, which is kind of a great idea, because when you think about it, the biggest pitfall of modern comic book movies is that the villains are always really undeveloped, or just really lame and forgettable, just super bland. You know, I could go on, I've been bent on this numerous times, but here, with Unbreakable 2, we have a superhero movie which could potentially have an amazing villain, like possibly the best villain we've seen since Heath Ledger's Joker, you know, in 2008. I consider that kind of the last great comic book superhero movie villain. So, you know, that's an exciting prospect. But again, you know, it's a big gamble. I'm not willing to let my hopes get that high when M. Night Shyamalan has such a dodgy track record. So I don't know, we'll see. I will say the potential is there. Whether that potential will be achieved, we will have to see. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this review. If you have made it this far, then you really do deserve a pat on the back and a peaceful lie down in a dark room somewhere. Do let me know, though, what you think of the movie Split in the comments section below. You can also like and subscribe if you're that way inclined. Although, in my 5 years on YouTube, I have learned that most of the people who watch my videos are not that way inclined. I must be doing something wrong, or maybe the world is wrong. Yeah, I prefer that explanation. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Or, as the case may be, I won't. I continue to wage a war against bad lighting, and I continue to lose.